In early Rome, Venus was not a gentle mother or moral symbol. Venus was sex, desire, fertility, and irresistible attraction. Romans believed Venus controlled lust, seduction, and reproduction, forces that could destabilize families and states if left unmanaged. Temples to Venus were linked to prostitution, fertility rituals, and public sexuality. Roman men prayed to Venus for pleasure, offspring, and dominance. Venus represented biological power, not emotional love. She was admired, feared, and politically dangerous. Julius Caesar did something unprecedented. Caesar claimed Venus as his personal divine ancestor. Caesar did not present Venus as modest. Caesar embraced Venus as passion, lineage, and sexual legitimacy tied directly to his bloodline. After Caesar's assassination, Rome entered chaos. Civil war, sexual scandal, and moral collapse dominated public life. Romans blamed excess, corruption, and uncontrolled desire for destroying the republic. Venus, once celebrated, became a problem. Augustus understood this danger clearly. Augustus did not remove Venus. Augustus redefined her. Augustus stripped Venus of raw sexuality and rebuilt her image as a mother, ancestor, and moral foundation of Rome itself. This is History and Society, where we explore how systems quietly shaped civilizations long before people understood what was happening. Part 1. Venus as Rome's goddess of sex and elite power. In early Rome, Venus ruled desire, fertility, and attraction, forces Romans believed quietly controlled bloodlines, marriages, and political alliances across the city. Roman temples to Venus were not hidden spaces. They stood near forums and markets, placing sex, fertility, and power directly inside public life. Romans believed sexual attraction was a divine force, not a private feeling, and Venus was the god who activated that force between bodies and families. Marriage in Rome was not romantic, it was strategic, and Venus governed the sexual bonds that produced heirs, property transfers, and elite continuity. Elite Roman women invoked Venus to secure beauty, fertility, and influence, knowing desire could move men more effectively than speeches or laws. Venus was linked to gardens, flowers, and perfumes, physical symbols. Romans associated with pleasure, temptation, and controlled indulgence. Roman art openly depicted Venus nude, signaling that sexuality was not sinful but powerful when placed within social hierarchy and tradition. Senators did not pray to Venus for love. They prayed for advantageous unions, fertile wives, and social stability through controlled desire. Venus was closely tied to lineage because Roman power depended on legitimate sons born from sanctioned sexual unions. The Roman elite believed uncontrolled desire caused chaos, while Venus represented desire disciplined by custom, ritual, and law. Public festivals for Venus allowed controlled excess, moments where sexuality was acknowledged but still framed by religious order. Prostitutes and elite matrons both worshipped Venus, revealing how Roman society linked sexuality across classes under one divine authority. Venus was not a rebel goddess. She reinforced hierarchy by ensuring desire served family survival and elite dominance. Roman men believed military courage and sexual potency were connected, both falling under divine influence from gods like Venus and Mars. Venus temples often stood near military spaces, visually linking conquest abroad with reproduction and continuity at home. Roman myths portrayed Venus as persuasive rather than violent, reflecting how influence often worked quietly through attraction, not force. Sexual scandals in elite families were treated as political threats, because misdirected desire endangered inheritance and alliances. Invoking Venus publicly signaled refinement, fertility, and legitimacy, markers that separated Roman elites from the masses. Over time, Venus became less about pleasure alone and more about controlled reproduction, elite continuity, and public image. This shift set the stage for a dramatic transformation, where sex would be repackaged as destiny and desire as imperial birthright. Part 2. Julius Caesar, Venus and the Weaponization of Desire. Julius Caesar publicly claimed descent from Venus, not as poetry, but as a political statement grounded in Roman myth and elite genealogy. Venus was not just a love goddess to Caesar, she was proof that his bloodline carried divine authority inside Roman power structures. The Julian family traced its origins to Aeneas, son of Venus, linking Caesar directly to Rome's mythical foundation narrative. This claim transformed Venus from a bedroom deity into a dynastic ancestor tied to Rome's survival story. Caesar built the temple of Venus Genetrix in Rome, physically anchoring divine sexuality into public political space. The word genetrix meant mother, not lover, signaling the first shift away from Venus as pure erotic force. Yet Roman audiences still understood Venus as desire, beauty, and attraction, making the claim deliberately ambiguous. Caesar weaponized that ambiguity, allowing Venus to represent both seduction and legitimacy at the same time. His political enemies accused him of moral excess, luxury, and sexual corruption, reinforcing Venus's erotic reputation. Caesar did not deny these rumors because desire itself enhanced his image of irresistible authority. Roman power was theatrical, and Caesar performed dominance through charisma, spectacle, and personal magnetism. Venus became the divine explanation for why people followed him willingly, not through fear alone. Coins issued under Caesar displayed Venus, circulating this message across the empire in daily transactions. Every payment reinforced the idea that Rome itself was funded by Venus's favor and Caesar's bloodline. This was not religious devotion, it was narrative control embedded in metal and money. Caesar's assassination shattered this narrative, leaving Venus's role unfinished and dangerously unresolved. If Venus protected Caesar, then why did the gods allow his murder in the Senate? Rome now faced a theological problem as much as a political one. Either Venus had failed or her role was about to be redefined entirely. That redefinition would not come from passion, but from calculation, discipline, and a young man named Augustus. Part 3. Venus recast as a mother, bloodline, and imperial destiny. After the civil wars, Rome was exhausted, fearful, and unstable, demanding order, legitimacy, and a moral explanation for why one man now ruled everything. Augustus did not remove Venus from Roman culture. He reshaped Venus into a controlled symbol that justified rule, bloodline, and future stability. Venus was reframed as Venus Genetrix, the divine mother who gave birth to Rome's destiny through a sacred lineage rather than uncontrolled desire. This version of Venus emphasized fertility, ancestry, and continuity, not erotic pleasure, making divine motherhood politically safer than sexual freedom. Augustus promoted Venus as the origin of Rome's ruling family, connecting divine birth to imperial authority through public monuments and official state rituals. Temples dedicated to Venus Genetrix were placed in political spaces, visually linking divine motherhood with law, order, and imperial governance. Coins began showing Venus in dignified poses, clothed, maternal, and calm, removing earlier associations with seduction, temptation, or uncontrolled passion. Poets under Augustus were encouraged to describe Venus as nurturing, protective, and civilizing, reshaping public imagination through repeated cultural reinforcement. Sexual power was no longer celebrated openly. Instead, it was disciplined and redirected into family structure, inheritance, and moral reform. Augustus passed strict marriage laws promoting childbirth and punishing adultery, aligning Venus's new image with state-controlled reproduction and social discipline. The goddess, who once justified elite indulgence, was now used to justify population growth, legitimate heirs, and the continuation of imperial order. Venus stopped being a personal symbol of desire and became a public symbol of Rome's future survival through lawful birth and succession. This transformation reduced female sexuality into state service, where fertility mattered more than pleasure or autonomy. Religion was used to regulate bodies, marriages, and bloodlines, turning divine mythology into social engineering at imperial scale. Venus as mother made Augustus appear not as a conqueror, but as a guardian continuing a sacred biological mission. Rome accepted this version of Venus because it promised stability after chaos, replacing passion with predictability. The empire learned to associate peace with controlled sexuality and disorder with uncontrolled desire. Venus's power was not removed, it was domesticated, redirected, and bound tightly to imperial ideology. By redefining Venus, Augustus redefined morality, authority, and what Rome considered dangerous or acceptable desire. But this transformation created tension, because desire does not disappear, it waits, suppressed beneath moral law and political control. Part 4. How Venus became Rome's moral mother. After Augustus secured power, Rome needed stability, not desire, because decades of civil war had exhausted Roman society and elite families. Augustus reframed Venus not as a goddess of erotic disruption, but as a divine mother who produced order, lineage, and imperial continuity. Venus Genetrix now stood as the symbolic ancestor of Rome's ruling house, linking sexual power directly to lawful inheritance and controlled reproduction. Statues of Venus shifted posture, clothing, and symbolism, replacing exposed skin with dignified formality, suitable for temples and public moral messaging. Augustus passed marriage laws promoting childbirth, fidelity, and legitimate heirs, while Venus became the divine justification behind these social reforms. The goddess once associated with seduction now legitimized marriage contracts, family honor, and the moral restoration of Roman aristocratic households. Public festivals emphasized Venus as a mother of Rome, rather than a source of individual pleasure or private desire. Erotic chaos was politically dangerous, so Augustus redirected sexual symbolism into reproduction, ancestry, and obedience to imperial structure. Venus no longer destabilized men through desire. She stabilized society through motherhood and state-approved family values. This transformation allowed Augustus to control sexuality without banning it, redefining desire as acceptable only when serving Rome's future. Temples reinforced this message by pairing Venus with images of Aeneas, Anchises, and Roman destiny rather than lovers or mythical affairs. Sexual power was absorbed into imperial propaganda, removing its threat while preserving its emotional influence over Roman imagination. Venus became proof that even desire must submit to order when an empire seeks permanence instead of conquest. Augustus understood that controlling symbols controlled behavior, and Venus was the most powerful symbol Rome had inherited. This was not religious reform. It was cultural engineering, using divine imagery to reshape private life across the empire. By redefining Venus, Augustus redefined Roman masculinity, femininity, family, and loyalty without direct force. The goddess of sex became the mother of empire because empires cannot survive long under unchecked desire. This shift explains why Rome endured longer under Augustus than under any general driven by ambition alone. Venus did not disappear. She evolved, becoming quieter, safer, and more politically useful than ever before. If symbols can reshape empires, subscribe to history and society to explore how belief systems quietly control civilizations.